Hello, it's me, Phoebe Cakes, and you're tuning into In My Crumble Opinion. On today's episode, we are talking about my summer obsession, pickleball. Just kidding. No, we're talking about Challengers, Luca Guadagnino's fourth film. Can we confirm that? I'm sorry, as you can tell, this video is going to be very well researched. Challengers. The film by Luca Guadagnino tracks the young lives of a trio of tennis players played by Zendaya, Mike Faced, Josh O'Connor, who continuously get pulled into each other's orbit by desire, fate, and circumstance. That's about as much as an oversight that I'm going to give you. If you don't know about the movie, you're probably not going to watch this video. If you're watching this video, you probably already love either my opinions or Challengers the film. So, I'm going to give the briefest of overviews. Patrick Zweig and Art Donaldson, portrayed by O'Connor and Face respectively, are doubles partners, best friends, and roommates who vie for the attention of Tashi Duncan Zendaya, a tennis wunderkind and rising star. The film tells this story through a series of flashbacks that interrupt the final game between Patrick and Art at New Rochelle, a regional challenger at a lower tournament that is also a qualifier for the US Open in 2019. Pre-pandemic, we stand. This takes place 13 years after we first meet Tashi, who is now married to Art and his coach, and while Patrick now plays in these lower circuits and skate by in winnings, even though we know his family's loaded through some expository dialogue. Anyways, through these flashbacks, we learn how Patrick initially dated Tashi and how Tashi's knee injury derails her career, and a history of infidelity that involve all three of them. The film itself isn't too preoccupied by the class of these characters, even though I did mention that Josh O'Connor's character, Patrick, is loaded, and presumably so is Art's family. But aside from that being part of their character makeup, it does help distinguish Tashi as markedly different from the other two, aside from her sex and race as well. Race itself is also not a preoccupation of the film, although I do think it, like I said, informs kind of the difference of these characters. And it isn't even really acknowledged until the latter third of the film, where, Tashi makes a point to refer to Art and Patrick as her little white boys. So for the sake of this review, I'll focus my comments on desire and sexuality, as I believe those are the driving components of how the film is so widely discussed and why I believe it's so successful. With that said, though, I would definitely love to consume a video essay or think piece or opinion or breakdown analyses of race and class in Challengers. So if any of y'all have access to that, go ahead and put it in the comments so I can read it and enjoy it, and maybe comment on it later in the future. But without bringing the lead, I do want to say that I fucking love this film. I think it's one of the greatest films of all time, maybe one of my favorite films of all time. Recency biased assumed. For one thing, I strongly identify as Zendaya as an Oakland baddie with a twink problem. Boink. Horny jail. And I think that one of the reasons I love this film so much is because I regard it as a queer masterpiece. Now, I did read a couple of dissenting reviews that called the film deeply heterosexual, and another review that likened the film to porn as opposed to art, as if the distinction between porn and art isn't a porous boundary. I'm going to table that for later. I do have this strong desire to contend with those ideas. What I think these commentators miss, and what I believe Luca understands, that sexuality is only one aspect of desire, but that sexual desire is also a primal foundation of all desire or drives. So in other words, sex is a metaphor, but also everything is sex. This truism is integral to the notion of queering text, and baby, this movie is queer. Not gay, maybe a little gay, but I want to venture to say that this movie is queer. Luca understands what most people who are queer media literate understand, that all sports are configurations through which heterosexual men can reroute their desire for one another, end zone, penetrating the end zone, I don't know, what are some other home run, home base, touchdown, let's punt, rhymes with I don't know, that's fishy to me. These scrums, oh my God, scrums, baby, that's gay. That's a circle jerk. Anyways, it's a way to focus their homoerotic desire for each other through sports or competing. And then also to reroute their desires through competing over women. Challengers literalizes, in some ways, reduces these notions in a crystalline and exciting way. Challengers does for queer theory what Barbie thinks it does for feminism. The best part is that straight people are also really enjoying this film and eating it up. So hopefully it's a way for them to maybe reckon with some of the weird, imaginary presuppositions that society has, mapped onto them. And me and us. So in this video, I'm going to break down why Challengers is a queer masterpiece. What? Part 1. It contends with the heterosexual imperative. Narrative structure. The film is already queer, as it's told through a series of flashbacks, as aforementioned, so in essence, non-linearly. This format gives context of characters' behaviors without giving too much of their internality. The film is disinterested in telling us what's in the internal worlds of these characters' minds, but rather lets us surmise their drives through how they interact with each other across time. Luca understands that mystery is necessary for desire. Mystery allows us to map fantasies onto people and our relationships with them. This reluctance to internality also parallels the blindness the characters have for their own drives. Additionally, Challengers subverts the marriage plot. The marriage plot is a narrative device most notably used by people like Jane Austen and more commonly seen these days in, let's say, rom-coms. So something like Red, White, and Blue, Red, Blue, and Royal. What is that? Stupid. Red, White, and Royal Blue is a lot more heterosexual, heteronormative by these standards than, let's say, this film, Challengers. The film actually starts with Tashi and Art already married, and the film unfolds showing the ruptures in their constructed fantasy of their marriage. The film doesn't posit that Tashi and Art don't love each other, rather that their marriage, perhaps, is depicted in a way that illustrates that the goal of life isn't to get married, and that desires and stories can run deeper than that goal. Likewise, in the first third of the film, Tashi makes this meta-modern comment that the goal of tennis isn't to win, but rather it's the relationship you have when you're playing against your opponent. This is perhaps the most salient instance of Luca's self-insertion in the film. Whenever you watch a movie and a character talks about craft, painting or acting or whatever, it's always the director coding his thoughts on filmmaking through the dialogue. So in this sense, Tashi is Luca's analog in that she calls the shots in her marriage, as a coach, as a partner, the same way that Luca calls the shot as the god of the film. Part 2. Tashi, the phallic woman. Art, the bottom. Zendaya as the film's Tashi is very apt casting. Of course, Zendaya is a trained dancer and has the build and kinesthetic awareness to pick up the vocabulary of movement needed to pull off convincing tennis play. Zendaya also pulls off what Luca and the writer Justin Koritsky's have penned, I believe, to be a phallic woman. Not only because she's a little tomboyish, as she plays a little bit of a tomboy in those Spider-Man films, and also somewhat of a tomboy in Dune, being like a woman warrior. But in psychoanalysis, there's a concept or a trope of the phallic woman is this masculine-coded, castrative mother figure. And I also feel like Zendaya operates that kind of space in her relationship with Tom Holland. They always kind of like frame Tom Holland as this like soft boy bottom. He's kind of shorter than Zendaya, but also has like a cute perky butt. And I think that kind of the energy of their celebrity relationship is also part of why she was cast in, this particular role. But to expound upon this idea of the phallic women, in Gail Rubin's essay, The Traffic in Women, she does have this really fascinating interrogation on kind of Lacan's analysis of the symbolic exchange of the phallus, which is derived from Freud's model of the Oedipus complex, where a woman can't really give the phallus, but can only receive it from a man. But, the women have the desire to like fuck their mothers. We're not going to get into all that. What makes Challengers queer, I'm here to make it queer, is that Tashi does have a phallus. Her phone number is the phallus that she gives to the winner of Art and Patrick's first match. So she has this coveted instrument which will endow power, and in the first half of the movie, it's her phone number. And then her coaching later on in the film becomes another phallus that the boys want gifted to them. It's also queer that Tashi isn't only kind of an agent of the phallus, but she's also an object of desire. And that's another reason why I think Zendaya is so aptly cast in this role, is because I really feel like no one can pull that off. Anyways, I digress. In other words, the boys want her dick, but they also want each other's dick. But the refusal to accept the gift of the dick from each other has them accept the dick from Tashi, should Tashi choose to relinquish it. So there's a lot of play with kind of the notion of who has power and who can distribute power, and what people desire from each other, and who they end up kind of extracting pleasure from, or power from. I also find it that it's not only ironic, but poetic that Tashi's phallic power of being able to coach these boys is only revealed once she's rendered impotent in the game of tennis when she breaks her knee. Power then comes from watching as opposed to athletic prowess. So the movie posits that watching is a higher form of power than, let's say, hitting the tennis ball, which again is maybe a metaphor for directing and spectatorship. So we're now in cahoots with Luca as one of the viewers of the film or observers of the film. I'm currently editing the video right now, and it occurred to me that I neglected to mention that Luca asked Darnell Appling, Zendaya's assistant, who got their start as Zendaya's body double on the Disney Channel, to play the part of the umpire, which further reinforces the idea that Zendaya's power comes from watching, and that her agency is somewhat deterministic, and by extension, having Darnell play the part of the umpire feeds into that. I've said it before, but I think Zendaya is really the only person that could really play the duality of the feminine, phallic warrior and high fashion model object of desire. Even when having probably the biggest contemporary movie star on set, Luca prioritizes the visual pleasure of looking at the boys rather than at Zendaya. And I also think that's very apt. In that sense, kind of our spectatorship is also queered. The film's queer perspective pushes the audience to gaze alongside Tashi. So we're looking with Tashi instead of at her. And then we're watching the boys fight over the chance to receive her feminine gift. We watch the boys play. We also watch them in these really sexualized shots, which I'll also get into later. The concept of phallic woman also sets up the queerness of the triangle, the strongest shape, of Tashi, Art, and Patrick. Art and Patrick have latent homoerotic desire for one another, which is so brilliantly literalized in how Tashi orchestrates the kiss.
This is very telling of what I like about cinema.
Which, I don't know if you watched it in a movie theater or not, but it erupted in, applause. That was the high watermark for the film. If the film ended there, I think we all would have been happy. But what I like about it happening so early is that it kind of contextualizes the rest of the film. We as an audience don't have to wonder whether the boys are sexually into each other because we know it. We're told at the beginning of the film, no, this is what's going on. So with speculation off the table, we get to see how, without guesswork, the boys sublimate their attraction for one another through their attraction to Tashi, whom they project their fantasies onto. But what makes it queer is that Tashi isn't like a Mary from Something About Mary or a Sabrina from the film Sabrina, but rather she's also an engineer. She kind of creates and directs, whatever sort of play is happening or vying that's happening for her. Whereas someone in, say, Bridget and Bridget Jones's Diary, a marriage plot, because it's based obviously on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, also might be a vanguard of her story. Tashi's character is a lot more complicated. She wields her phallic power recklessly, the way men do. And that's mirrored by the character of Patrick, who's also a reckless phallus wielder. And that also kind of sets up Art as Tashi's foil. What's also queer is that Art is the only one that could give Tashi what she wants, and that's a tennis career, vicariously through him. Art is the bottom of the film, and we know that because it's telegraphed very clearly in the way that Art is shot. Luca shoots face in these like kind of like effeminate poses. He's almost always kind of like slumped over in bed with his like cute little booty poking out or sumptuously centered in the frame. We see it multiple times throughout the film. I think his first shot is him kind of like in bed. The alarm goes off. We listen to the soundtrack, right? Yes. The alarm goes off. He's in bed. His booty's out. This is contrasted by how armpit and ab forward Luca chooses to shoot O'Connor. Armpits and abs kind of being a obvious stand-in for Patrick's large fabled cock that it's alluded to in the film. A cock that he does gift to Tashi, but unlike Tashi's phallus, which is constructive, the gift of his phallus is destructive. It literally destroys her knee and disrupts her marriage. So anyways, I still kind of want to see it, and I'm kind of mad that we didn't really get to see it, but that's fine. I just want to say that I think this is all demonstrated in the cinematic choices that Luca makes. I also want to entertain that I feel like Luca chooses to work with heterosexual male writers, such as Asaman, who penned the screenplay and wrote the novel that Call Me By Your Name is based off of, and Koritskis, who penned this amazing script, who live as heterosexual men. And I think because, like, not because they understand the gay male experience, but they understand the perversity of desire and how desire is inherently queer and, you know, has levels of psychological gymnastics. And he also chooses to work with like heterosexual male twinks like Chalamet, Feist, and Connor. And I think working with straight men gives Luca kind of something to direct against. But also because I think he understands that gayness is not the same thing as queerness, and that straight guys are sometimes the most queer. Which brings me to the soundtrack. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor did team up again to score this movie. They won the Oscar for Social Network, and bitch, they wrote another banger. I mean, like, this is a really good soundtrack. It's like ear candy. Like, I love it. But in sharing their kind of notes in scoring this film with GQ, they said that Guadagnino semi-jokingly proposed early on to them that it should all just be loud techno music, which it did end up being. And they also said that this one line note from Guadagnino dominated their scoring process, and the line note was unending homoerotic desire, which is so perfectly rendered in the score. The music is constantly in your face and imparts a highly charged energy to all of the scenes. In homoerotic desire, anyone who's gay knows that there's always this looming tinge of the adversarial. Many people have compared the music to Game Boss battle music. The score illuminates how battle or tennis is also twinned with sexual desire and how queer desire is inherently contentious. The music also, like, slaps. When my partners and I watched this film, we immediately identified it as Steamworks music. And if you don't know what Steamworks is, it's a gay bathhouse, and they play music exactly like this. And it has this, like, loveless throb reminiscent of anonymous fucking. But the music also is punctuated by these motifs of recognition that rupture the monotony. In fact, I think that's what Luca was ultimately aiming for when giving his notes to Ross and Reznor, the feeling of mutual recognition that happens when two gay men dance on some sort of club floor. In other words, the movie goons. And if you don't know what gooning is, feel free to pause it, go look it up, and come back. Basically, once you know what gooning is, you're going to understand this next statement. Gooning is to masturbation what Tashi's conception of tennis is, what she knows tennis to be, and what the boys think tennis is at the beginning of the film. For Tashi, it's not about the points, the coming, okay? It's about the relationship you build when you're in the throes of playing. And music just captures and emulates and reproduces the adrenaline of the game, play, sex, anticipation, and delayed release. And that delayed gratification really comes to like a head, a culmination, a catharsis that really makes the ending like both ambiguous but also like very finite. I'm not going to give it up, but if you've seen the film, it's just like, yeah, the ending was great. The final song of the soundtrack, Compress or Repress, which plays while the credits roll, was co-written by Guadagnino alongside Ross and Reznor. And it's tormented. The song stands out as an anthem of power, of repression, and magnifying longing. My co-writer Angel also points out that the lyrics read as akin to one of those popper bait hypno instruction videos: compress, repress, regress, and then just surrender. Oh my god, I can't believe you wrote that. That's gross. No, I'm just kidding. The song encapsulates Guadagnino's vision of homoerotic repression as a painful, persistent process that produces powerful sexual or athletic energies. I just think it's a great film. I didn't even go into kind of like the film techniques that went into it, which I also think were very queer. You know, the way the shots were set up, like as the ball or from underneath the court, watching the boys play each other from beneath. I think those are ways of like queering the lens, not only because it's like gay and it looks at them kind of sexually or objectifies them, but like there's these novel, uncommon ways of enjoying the athleticism. I think it's the greatest sports film of all time. It's the greatest film of all time. And anyone that thinks differently sucks, you know? I mean, to anyone that says the movie is sexless, heterosexual, or pornographic, well, I have nothing for you. Go watch Saltburn, okay? Go enjoy Saltburn. Saltburn is jacking off, while Challengers is gooning. Oh, yeah, this is my Art Donaldson over here. Been training him. Coach Phoebe. All right, go hit the shower, Art. Ugh, God, hate him.